Well, ladies and gentlemen, in an update to the whole January 6th story, there are now congressional sources confirming nearly 300 FBI operatives were embedded into the crowd on January 6th, and they've got one here on video breaking into the Capitol and then blaming it on an innocent bystander. And so this was stuff that we already knew. Democrats, of course, initially denied it. They said January 6th was the worst thing in history. They still to this day compare it to 9/11, even though the only person that died on January 6th was a Trump supporter. And we know the Democrats, Trump on January 3rd, according to the Congressional House Republicans, Trump said, I need the National Guard there. It's going to be raucous and make sure that nobody does anything stupid. If the National Guard was there, there'd be no break in. Liberals wanted a break in. They wanted to use it as political leverage against Trump. And there's Fed operatives all within the crowd. Some of them are egging people on. We all know the crazy stories of some of them saying, go break in, go do this. They knew that if it got bad enough, they would be able to silence Trump. And remember, they couldn't ban Trump because it would make the country look third world. All the social media back in 2021 was controlled by the Democrats, but they said, well, listen, we need a real catalyst to be able to ban Trump. And so they said, well, look at this, January 6th, we have to ban him now. And that's when they silenced him. And they thought there was no chance Trump could come back. They wanted him charged. They wanted him in prison. And now you're seeing the charges against Comey. And Comey's doing videos like crying, acting like he's a martyr. It's pathetic. But let's take a look at this. 300 FBI operatives and see what this video says that were embedded into the crowd.
Do not go in there.
A radio journalist from Michigan was shooting video that day at the Capitol. What he captured were two, most charitably called, suspicious actors, but they are dressed in such a way that led him to believe that they were government agents. And one of them, after the windows had been broken by a protester, it was encouraging people to pull the rest of the glass out and go inside. Bobby Powell, who was the journalist that had shot it, and he has his camera rolling, he told him that would be illegal. And that wouldn't be a good idea. He warned people off not to go into that window. And then he turned his camera around and he caught this agent or suspicious actor pulling a large pane of glass out, this tempered glass. It kind of folds into itself, crunch onto the ground. When he realized he was being filmed, he quickly dropped it. It seems apparent on the video that he did not want to be seen doing what he just did. So he pulled in a protester and started blaming him. He said, what are you doing breaking that window? The poor fellow that was being accused didn't know what was going on. And then he gave him a couple of really good shoves and cocked his arm like he was going to punch him. We don't know. His facial image is not on any of the Sedition Hunters sites or the FBI's most wanted site, but he clearly was committing criminal damage to property, and he has not been charged. So it raises a question of why.
Also, the individual trying to, again, opening the window up is even encouraging people to enter, I believe, as well?
Yes.
What's he saying?
Well, he said, why don't y'all open the rest of it up?
Why don't you guys open up the rest of it? Because I think that'd probably be illegal. Oh, I know, my glasses.
And so they're acting fully as provocateurs, and they're trying to drum up the crowd to go into the Capitol. They wanted it as bad as humanly possible. And really, how ranging is this if there's 200 FBI agents trying to encourage people to commit crimes? So you look at January 6th, you look how ridiculous it is, and there's just another video of it. And now it's been confirmed after all of these arguments. I saw old videos from CNN back in 2021. They're trying to say, no, there was no FBI operatives. They've confirmed now it's over 300. Because remember, they originally said there were none. Then they said, well, there were some. There were a few. Well, now apparently there were over 300. And we know what Trump said at the eclipse, peacefully and patriotically. Of course, if Trump really wanted to try and do something, he at that point still had control of the executive branch. He was still the president. It was a lame duck period. But he could have done a lot more than telling people to be peaceful and patriotic and calling for the National Guard 3 days before January 6th. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't give it to him. And, they wanted it as bad as humanly possible. They wanted the political leverage over Trump. And they utilized that leverage to ban him off of all of social media and effectively cancel him. And that's when DeSantis kind of came into the light within the Republican Party. And it took a few years for Trump to really come back with MAGA. But it really doesn't surprise me, honestly, when you see things like that. We've also got this. Russia says a war with NATO will break out if NATO shoots down Russian aircrafts. So there's been a lot of worry and speculation surrounding Russia potentially flying drones in NATO airspace, Polish airspace. There was a report about a month ago of it where drones had gotten shot down. And now there's all this talk about NATO and Russia's getting really uneasy. And Trump has now sided with Ukraine fully, at least publicly. And so what does all of this mean? Is there going to be a escalation? Is there going to be a serious war with Russia and NATO? I think absolutely not. It would not go well for Russia. It would not go well for the world, but specifically Russia. And it would not be a smart idea, especially with Russia's movements within Ukraine. At this point, I think they would be happy with a new government within Ukraine, a more pro-Russian government. Whether or not they'll get that, I don't know. It'll be dependent on how long this war lasts. Seems like they're trying to wait out Ukraine. They know they have a numbers advantage over them in terms of manpower. And whatever comes of it is the one thing I was thinking about. I'm guessing Russia is thinking the longer this war goes on, you would figure because of the advantage that Russia has in terms of armament size, they will have more leverage and more leverage and more leverage and more leverage the longer it goes on. They could almost just wait out Ukraine and negotiate a deal that they want to where Ukraine has almost no leverage, even though they have the backing of NATO. The problem is there are no NATO troops helping Ukraine because NATO doesn't want to take the risk of escalation with Russia. So Russia's thinking, well, if we can just wait them out and they get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and now it's 3.5 years into the war. Soon it's going to be 4 years into the war, 4.5 years. Trump's tried to end it. I'm sure, there has been talk to where Trump and the United States are ready to offer annexed oblasts for Russia within the Donbass region, and then full recognition of Crimea as well. But Putin, I think, maybe they want more land. They want Ukraine demilitarized. They want more Russian influence within Ukraine, so it's not a buffer state to NATO. So to me, that's all of it. But I do think it is a pretty clear and concise thought process for Russia. There's no way Russia wants war with NATO, especially the fact that they've already been involved in a war for 3.5 years. They're going to invade Poland. Do you think that's going to work out well for Russia? I'm not saying, let's do it so we can, so Russia can be destroyed. It would be a net negative for the whole world and for all of the economies, and nobody wants it. But just in general, that's not a smart military strategy for Russia to be involved in a war for 3.5 years, exhaust manpower, and then invade Poland. And now Article 5 gets enacted. It's just not smart. And now you've got all of NATO, including the United States, full-fledged with men against Russia. And then that would potentially give NATO an excuse to get the land back for Ukraine. Because right now there's no way that Ukraine can really get that land back outside of Russia's economy collapsing, their government collapsing, or NATO troops go into eastern Ukraine and get the land back for them, which would be an escalation. And that would be direct fighting, and then you're talking about a widespread war or a larger scale war. So I think people have to calm down. Russia does not want to go to war with NATO. A lot of this is posturing. I think Trump is posturing when he says that Ukraine can get the land back. It's more so just to say he's on the side of Ukraine, and that Russia really needs to come to the negotiating table because the funding for Ukraine will continue, the armament will continue, and the fight against Russia will continue. But I do think Russia is sitting back saying, we have the advantage. If there are no NATO troops involved, there is no way. Because remember, they're using North Korean troops as well. Russia is. There is no way they can out manpower us. Let's wait them. Let's bog it down, and then maybe start the negotiations in a year or two. Think about our leverage in a year or two when the Ukraine military is even more exhausted, and Russia's will be as a byproduct as well, but not to the same degree because the military is stronger in Russia. So I think that's what's going on when it comes to that. I think Citarelli's going to win, honestly. You look at some of this stuff with New Jersey, 2025 governor, mail-in voting, Republicans +9 points, more red than in 2024. I think the amped comparison would be 2021. Yeah, 2021 is a better comparison. 2024, that's a general election. And it's going to be more extreme liberal during that, because we saw Citarelli only lost by 2.5 points in 2021. And see, even 2021, 3.5 points more Republican. I think Mikey Sherrill is just a bad candidate. And again, Citarelli only lost to Murphy, the incumbent, by 2.5 points. He loses to an incumbent by 2.5 points. Sherrill is not a good politician. And so I think Citarelli will win that, but it is still pretty early. You've also got this: U.S. Latino immigrants generate 1.6 trillion in GDP, report says. Well, it's not. And so this is an interesting argument when it comes to the immigration stuff: GDP versus culture versus demographics, all these things. How do they work? The GDP going up, people think, well, that signals the United States is more powerful, meaning everyone in the country will, increase their living quality and things like that. It's the exact opposite. It actually works in the opposite sense. Immigration is an extremely capitalist mindset, and I like capitalism, but it's just funny to see these liberals argue for immigration, especially the immigration that we're getting to where many Americans are getting disenfranchised out of jobs because the market is so competitive. Think about the H-1B situation, things like that. They said that they accused us, kind of in a rhetorical sense, as being pro-DEI, like white Americans were pro-DEI because we didn't want to deal with all the immigrants coming in from all around the world. And it's like they're a meritocracy. Well, no, that's just globalism. What even is the United States? What is the culture? What is the demographical identity of the country? It doesn't exist if we're just taking immigrants from all around the world. There's no point of even having a border if we're just going to do that. There has to be a demographical identity of the country. That's what Trump says. That's what we're really talking about. There has to be a demographical identity, and we're losing it. So the point is we're going to shut the immigration off. Whether or not we lose GDP or not, the country must exist first. The culture of the country must exist, and then we'll worry about the GDP. I think our GDP is fine in a per capita sense compared to China. It's like China's going to pass the United States. Well, China has like 3.5 times the population as us. I don't think it's a huge issue. Our life quality on a per person basis is way better than China's, whether they pass us in GDP or not, or defense spending. I mean, our defense spending is now over $1 trillion. So the whole thing with, it's 1.6 trillion. Yeah, but that doesn't mean life quality of a middle class person is better because it's 1.6 trillion. It acts very likely the life quality is worse because of the housing market, how competitive it is with more immigrants coming in. The United States has more illegal immigrants than any other country in the world, and just 40 million more immigrants in the second close country in like the last 50 years. It's really bad. It's a more competitive housing market. It's a more competitive job market. That all affects things, especially for a middle class person, more so than overall net GDP, which would more so affect extremely wealthy people who have millions and billions of dollars tied up in index funds and stocks and treasury bonds and things of that nature. You've also got the UK passing digital ID. You've got the Republicans, Nigel Farage, coming out saying, no, it's bad. I don't know what's going on with the UK. And people say, well, you're over embellishing it, you're exaggerating it. No, it is. If you look at the numbers, if you say on a social media app like X, if you say a slur, they will arrest you. Literally, they will arrest you. So that's how crazy it is. And they've got like the chart of like online arrests or arrests based off of online language, and the UK is number one by far. And so the UK, to me, is a perfect case study. When you look at the United States and you look at the UK, obviously both countries have they have a lot of technology, a lot of people on the internet, but the UK is significantly more liberal than the United States. So there is, in a sense, it's kind of like an opposite effect. Because we're more conservative than them, in the United States, there always has to be some type of equilibrium when it comes to how far this modern liberalism can go, especially when it comes to the internet. Because remember, this was the exact argument that they would use, in a sense, back in 2020 and 2021, when they would say, well, the internet is not free speech. They said they're private companies, so it doesn't matter. And the thing is, and this has all been investigated now, and you saw what YouTube said a few days ago, the Biden administration would consistently talk with Twitter, with YouTube about banning people, about medical misinformation, about election denialism. And so it'd be like this big cabal with the Liberal Party and all of the social media apps. And this is like an extension. It's the digital ID, where if you say bad things or you're not the perfect liberal, they will ding you. And it's a very dystopian thing. So you've got that. Hopefully they end up, you've got Starmer announcing mandatory digital ID for the right to work in the UK, right? It's along the same lines as the vaccine. If you didn't have a vaccine, you couldn't work. That's why a lot of people had to get vaccines. That's why a lot of kids had to get vaccines. College kids, you couldn't be on campus without a vaccine. And so it's a similar model when it comes to something like the digital ID. If you want to get it, well, you have to get it if you want to participate in society in terms of having a job. And we've got this final thing, Trump on the White House grounds talking about the Comey indictment with a reporter.
President Trump, are you worried now that the next time there's a Democratic president, they will indict your FBI director or people in your administration?
That's what they tried to do, right? They did it with me. For 4 years, they went after me. They went after me for 4 years, and that doesn't include the 4 great years that we had in the White House. So when I ran it from, 2016 when we won, it began before I got to office. You know that. Wait a minute. Before I came to office, I started hearing rumors about Russia. I said, what the hell do I have to do with Russia? Nothing. And then it got worse and worse, and some of the fakers, not you, but some of the fake news picked it up and they loved it. And we went through a long time with that. And despite that, we had a great first term.
Because that's how it went, where they made you go and take a mugshot. Is this more about justice or is it about revenge?
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people. He wasn't the biggest, but he's a dirty cop. He's always been a dirty cop. Everybody knew it. And it's, as far as the case is concerned, he gave an answer. It was just.
And so there's Trump. And listen, when it comes to something like this, there is going to be a level of retribution, whether you want to call it justice or they were trying to get Trump there to say revenge. I mean, especially with what they did to Trump, and, with Democrats, it tends to be the proxy executive branch. They try and say, well, it's local municipal stuff, like the racketeering case in Georgia, the hush money case in New York. I mean, it's just the legal grounds and the historicness of the New York case is remarkable. The elevation of 34 the misdemeanor charges, that's never been happened, especially for a nonviolent crime like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so obviously they did weaponize, when they controlled everything against Trump, they did weaponize power, and they did try and put Trump in jail. So there's going to be, in a sense, a retribution. And listen, they got Comey for lying during a hearing with Ted Cruz, and he'll have his day in court, and we'll see what comes of it. And that's kind of what it is. And I did say in a tweet, I said, well, nothing ever happens, like the Chud Jack meme. And I was really talking about World War III, because so many people say, well, it's going to be World War III. And they always say that, and it just never happens. And I don't even think World War III with the dynamic in Eastern Europe can happen, but also like the nothing ever happens in terms of Comey. I mean, will Comey actually go to jail? Those people tend to be protected class. Now we'll see what kind of judge he gets. But I have a hard time believing he would actually go to prison. But who knows? I think this is just Trump. And we knew this was coming at some point. Trump got very angry at Pam Bondi. He said this wasn't happening fast enough. And there was some talk about somebody getting expelled in terms of within this, grand jury to actually indict Comey. And apparently somebody got replaced, and that's what they're trying to argue. But there was always going to be something like this from Trump, and the supporters wanted it. And so we'll see what comes of this, but it is what it is, but it doesn't surprise me. And this is one of those things to where it's like, you like the politicking, you like everything, but there's so much domestic infighting within the country, and it's just the way it is. And a lot of it is Trump to a degree, the enigma of Trump with how much liberals hate him and what they did. I mean, going back to the beginning of the video with January 6th and how much they drummed that up, and you do any bit of research when you look at what the House Democrats uncovered, and you'll see that Trump wanted the National Guard there. And if the National Guard was there, there'd be no break into the Capitol. Why would Trump, if he wants there to be a break into the Capitol to stop the vote from being confirmed, why would he call on the National Guard? That makes no sense. Why would, better yet, on the day of January 6th, why would Trump tell people to be peaceful and patriotic, like being peaceful? If you want the vote to be delayed by your supporters marching into the Capitol, why would you not galvanize them to do that? It just doesn't make any sense. And so, I mean, I guess Trump could have came out a little bit earlier and told people to go home, but still, the way January 6th happened, it was all manipulation. Now it's been confirmed there were 200-300 agents that were provocateurs trying to get Trump supporters. It's entrapment, and they need to really investigate that, and people need to understand what really happened on January 6th and how much was conjured up by the overall hype, and it wasn't even Trump supporters, and just how much they overrated January 6th to try and use it as I mean, it's hard to overrate it because there was only one death and it was a Trump supporter. So how much can you really overrate something like that to where they say it's this insurrection coup when, and you don't base it all off of this, but if you're going to compare this to other events in history like 9/11, there's one death and it's a Trump supporter, really? And then they try and say, well, retroactive, there were 4 or 5 suicides in relation to January 6th. That's not how it works. You don't do retroactive, but 3 months later, somebody committed suicide because of January 6th. I mean, come on. So, but notice that's what they do to try and make the event worse than it actually is. And so that's basically the reality. And this all goes back to things like that. And obviously the Russia stuff. And that was the first one. Trump won in 2016. There's no way he could have won. They said Russia cheated. They tried to make it an illegitimate presidency for 2.5 years. Trump had that hanging over his head. And obviously he's not too happy with it. And so it really all goes back to that. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.